Hi everyone, Dennis here with a little look behind the scenes of Nevermore's development process. Today I wanted to show you some neat things I do with the color palettes of my sprites. Because without these touches they had the habit of feeling a bit out of place in some scenes. Now, if I take the sprite for Irene here and put it in this brightly lit house, this works fine. But now let's move her outside into the rain. Still okay, but it would be nicer if her colors were a bit more washed out to fit with the scene. Now let's go down into the dungeon. And now she is way too bright, it's almost like she's glowing in the dark. The color palettes will need some adjustments to account for that. But before I make any changes, let's check out how other games handle this problem. If we take a look at the best video game ever made, we can see that Samus has two color palettes, her normal one and a darker blue tinted one for creepy areas. The normal palette also gets a red glowing animation whenever she is cooked alive. And in some areas a transparent layer on top of everything adds to the effect. This way Samus is always a part of the scene she is in and she never looks out of place. Good stuff. This isn't even the first time we see an approach like that in a Nintendo game. Zelda 2 did the exact same thing. Link has a normal palette and a blue one for dark caves. And the color of Link's outline is the exact same as the most prominent color of the cave's tileset. Which makes sense since they want the sprite to blend in and are working with a very limited color palette on the NES. Now, I myself work with some self-imposed limitations. I wanted the game to have a consistent look to it and decided to limit myself to a 64 color palette. With these restrictions in mind, bringing the colors of the scenery into the sprites seems like a pretty good idea, so I am going to use that as a starting point. For that I will have to tell the game what colors are okay to use. As a quick and dirty solution, I will just hide the raindrops, hide Irene and take a screenshot. Then I turn that screenshot into a color palette with just 2 clicks of my mouse. Thank you, sprite. And now I tell the game to replace each color of the sprite with the closest match from that palette. We are not there yet and it is going to look horrible, but let's check out what happens. I expected worse, to be honest. But as it turns out, the color palette of a rainy night doesn't have anything in it that matches light skin or white hair. But earlier we saw in Super Metroid that the yellow power suit gets a greenish look in the blue area. For me that means I only want to completely replace colors when they are already very similar. If they are too different, I want to mix the colors instead. But if I mix, the result is very likely to be outside of the game's 64 color palette. So I have to compare it with that palette as well and then take the closest match. With all these changes made, let's try it again. Yes, much better. This looks like a rainy night. Let's put these two next to each other. Here we go, nice washed out colors for the bad weather. That means this scene is working, so let's go back into the dungeon. Where Irene is still way too bright and we lost a lot of contrast. So what's going wrong here? Well, remember that Irene's default palette matches this scene. Just mixing in the dungeon's colors isn't enough. The solution is simple. I give the area a property for its general brightness and I tell my sprite to adjust its own brightness accordingly. And only after that the color corrections will run. With these changes made, let's try it again. Very nice, this is pretty much what I wanted. Let's compare these again. This works. So I did what I wanted to do and I could call it a day here, but in that last step I just implemented a way to manipulate the brightness of my sprites, and that opens up new possibilities. I could give an object the ability to change the brightness of other objects, and if I do that and then light a fire here, Irene gets brighter again, and darker if I move away. And just like that I made fully dynamic lighting for my sprites, and still everything will stay within the limits of my 64 color palette. But something is still missing. I just lit a torch in this room and it's still pretty dark in here. So I'm just going to take everything I made until now and apply it to the tile maps as well. And if I light this torch now, the room gets a bit brighter. And with the other one it becomes fully lit. And with that we are done for today. Before I go, huge shout out to Charles Saab, Derek Williams, and the rest of my fantastic patrons. Thanks for your support, thanks for watching, and see you next time.